Hey everyone, and welcome to the last show of the monthly dev for 2021. I can't believe we are already wrapping the year. It feels like we just started, but this is actually our 12th event already. We started back on January. And actually, during this amazing 1 year, well, I remember the time when we just opened the meetup group. There are already 4,000 of you, even over 4,000 of you, who are taking part constantly in our events, and we are so happy and delighted to have you here. So I would like to thank you all for coming and for joining every month for these shows. And for closing this year, we have a special lineup just for you. So let's take a look who is going to present to you today. So 1 second, let it start. But until it starts, so we have Shimon from Datree, who is going to show us and teach us the insights that he gathered from reading over 100 Kubernetes postmortems. So if you are into Kubernetes and you want to learn all the do's and don'ts, this is the talk for you. Coming up after Shimon is Mike from Ionic, and he's going to show us how to create delight and best-in-class user experience for your web applications. And lastly, closing this year, Yuval from Amplication, who will show us how to get started with Amplication, which is a low-code open source platform for backend developers. So without further ado, please welcome on stage Shimon from Datree. Hey Shimon, how are you doing? You are muted. 1 second. Please unmute yourself.
Hi everyone,
Hey,
it's great to be here.
how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's actually the final show of the year. It's like the Super Bowl. I like it.
Yeah. You got the honor, to do your talk on the last talk of the year, and we
It's
are
great
very
to be
excited to
here.
have you.
I'm a personal fan of daily.dev. I'm using daily.dev on my browser and I love it very much. So it's really fun to be here as a fellow user and fanboy.
And we love hosting you as well. So good luck, and let me share your screen. Okay, it's here, and
Sure.
I'll be in backstage if you need me.
Sure thing. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So, today I'm going to talk to you about what we've learned from working with dozens of organizations and reading hundreds of Kubernetes postmortems, experiencing some of them ourselves, and helping our customers overcome them. So, my name is Shimon Tolts, and I'm the co founder and CEO of Datree. And what we do is we help prevent misconfigurations from reaching production in Kubernetes. And as you can imagine, we tackle a lot of misconfigurations. Besides being an AWS community, besides being the CEO of Datree, I'm also an AWS community hero. I run one of the largest AWS communities in the world. We are 8,000 cloud enthusiasts. So I get to share and knowledge and talk with lots of DevOps and cloud engineers. I'm also one of the leaders of the CNCF Tel Aviv chapter. So you might say I live and breathe Kubernetes. So let's just dive into it. So first of all, how are we even here, and how did we get to tackle so many misconfigurations? So actually, the tree is an open source project that has more than 5,000 GitHub stars, and any one of you can read the code and contribute to it and really participate. And what this code does, it's a scanner that identifies misconfigurations in Kubernetes manifests and Helm charts and helps DevOps engineers and developers prevent those misconfigurations from reaching production. Maybe you forgot to put in a memory limit. Maybe you forgot to set a liveness probe. Maybe you misclicked and misplaced your labels. And those are very important things that you want to have in your Kubernetes manifest. So, as the tree and as the open source, runs in the development phase and in the CI/CD process of developers, we get to see a lot of different configurations and policies is how we roll. So here are some of the mistakes that we see. So the way I chose to present it is actually to do a small game show to show you a configuration file and for you to guess what is the misconfiguration, and then I will actually explain what is the misconfiguration and why is it a misconfiguration and how to avoid it. And then later on, I will go over the different tools and practices you can leverage in order to make sure that those misconfigurations don't reach production, because no one wants to be the developer that introduced misconfigurations and caused a major outage. So first of all, we have our number one Kubernetes misconfiguration, and let me use my pointer here. And as we can see, it's and the API version is batch beta. This workload is a cron job actually, and it is scheduled to run every 1 minute, I think, maybe. And the concurrency policy is allow. Now, what is the mistake? Is the problem with the API version? Is it with the scheduler itself? Is it with the concurrency policy? Or is it with the incorrect YAML structure? Now, when it comes to cron job, I always go to like an online cron job validator because you never know and you never remember how often something happens. And actually, in this case, the misconfiguration here is the concurrency policy. And why is it so? This cron job spawns a container every 1 minute. And it basically checks that there is a container that is constantly living. And the problem is that if you give it the concurrency policy of allow, what will happen is if the previous job has not finished running, it will still spawn a new one. And actually, this misconfiguration happened to a very large company, which everyone, I suppose, knows, and it's called Target. And it actually spawned more than 4,000 pods that were constantly restarting and relaunching, because instead of setting the concurrency policy to forbid and to say, hey, you can only have one of this workload at the same time, it actually spawned 4,000. So this is why it's important to make sure, unless this is your desired behavior, but in most cases it is not, to make sure that your concurrency policy is set to forbid. And one lesson that you can learn from this is don't trust the default configuration. Just because this is what's configured by default, it doesn't mean that it is good or what you intended. So don't believe the default configuration and check it by yourself. Secondly, is we have yet another cron job example here, and we have a more sophisticated scheduler, and actually the concurrency policy is forbid, which is what we learned previously, so it seems good. So you might think to yourself, what is the problem here? Is it the restart policy maybe, or is it the concurrency policy? Seems not, because this forbid, sorry. Is it an incorrect YAML structure, or is it a mistake? So we can see that the job template here has a successful job history limit of 1 and failed jobs history limit of 1. Has a correct concurrency policy. Seems very weird that there is a problem here. But actually the problem is the location of the configuration. And this is again a very common mistake where you just put it in the wrong place. It's the right configuration, it is what you wanted to do, but it is just in the wrong place. And again, this is something that is very hard to identify as a developer. We're not human debuggers for YAML, so it is harder to do. And this actually happened to Zalando, and it caused their API server to go out of memory because it constantly spawned issues. So again, make sure that you actually set the correct configuration in the correct place. And make sure that you define the policies in your organization. A third one is we have a configuration of an ingress. It is very popular. The host that accepts traffic is star. It uses HTTP and supports the path foo, and then it goes to a backend, and there's a service name and a service port. So the question here is whether there is a problem with the API version, or with the rules, or with the host, or no mistake. And the answer is actually that there is a misconfiguration here. And the misconfiguration is around host. And if you just set a star and you don't give it a specific host name, path, prefix, what will happen? And this is what happened again to Target. They, large organization, you have a lot of people, things can happen. The entire cluster went down because actually all of the traffic that the cluster received was directed into this poor ingress controller instead of the specific traffic that they wanted. So you need to delegate the knowledge to your developers and make sure that they configure the correct set of configuration, because a small mistake like this and it reroutes all traffic to this ingress controller from your entire cluster, and it's an honest mistake. I could have done it. It's And the final one that we have, the final example, is a metadata. It's a deployment of kind pod. It has a metadata name front end, and it's a container. It pulls an image. What could possibly be an issue here, right? Maybe there is no host, no rules, no limits, or no mistake. So the correct answer here is that there are no limits. And this is a very big problem. And again, the default configuration does not require you to specify limits. And this is something that happened to a company called Blue Metador. And their entire cluster went down because they actually ran a third-party application that consumed their entire memory, and because of the cluster and nodes, and because there were no memory limits, it caused the cluster to go down. It reminds me, back in the day, I would run a RabbitMQ servers. It's a queue server. And by default, what it does, it consumes all the memory that is available in the machine to use for queuing. So, some third-party applications, this is their intended behavior, to consume all the memory. So all of your workloads should have memory and CPU limits. And not only that, especially for third-party applications that you do not know how they're going to behave. So don't be afraid. Misconfigurations happen to everyone, the greatest companies of all. And, I showed you 4 examples, but it's really hard to remember every one of the examples. And also, there are so many different examples. Like, I'm a software developer. How am I supposed to remember all of those misconfigurations and prevent them from happening? And I want to propose 3 steps and show you several tools that you can leverage in order to do it. So number 1, I suggest you define the policies that you want to have in your organization. Decide which policies should run on every workload, and define granular policies. I'll give you an example. You might say, I want to have a memory limit for all of my workloads. So let's set a 4 gigabytes memory limit for all of my workloads. But then maybe you would want to run some AI workloads, and those need 50 gigabytes of memory. So then the limitation of 4 gigabytes will actually cripple this poor team that just wants to run AI. So it really makes sense to have several tiers of policies where you have company-wide policies. For example, make sure every Docker container has a health check. Make sure every Kubernetes workload has a liveness probe and readiness probe. Those can be mandatory. And then you can have more granular policies that are specific to specific workloads or deployments or sets. The next thing is to integrate the policies within your organization. Because let's say you write those policies and you send a nice email, hey everyone, those are our policies now. It's actually not going to do much, and no one is going to follow them. So I believe that everything has to be validated and every code change has to be scanned. And the best place to do it is to enforce policy checks in your CI/CD pipelines. So when a developer makes a code change, it will scan and check for those policies that you've defined. And finally, I believe that you need a way to control, review, and monitor your policies. Because if you're even 20 developers and you have 50 Git repositories, it's really hard to know what is running where, which Kubernetes files were scanned, and it becomes a challenge. And let's say you want to change a policy. So what? Am I supposed to open 50 pull requests to change some policy in all of my repositories? It becomes really, really challenging. Um, and for in order to implement those 1, 2, 3 practices I showed, I suggest you can use 3 open source tools: Datree, Conftest, and Gatekeeper. You can use only one of them or all 3 of them. They're all open source. So first of all, Gatekeeper is a policy engine that runs on Kubernetes itself, and it works by having a predefined hook that runs every time that you want to launch or modify a resource in your Kubernetes cluster. So you do kubectl apply, then you want to do something in your cluster. At this point, there is a webhook controller that calls Gatekeeper and asks him, hey, can this resource be launched? And then it runs a policy check, and maybe Gatekeeper says, hey, this resource does not have labels, and we will not know what it is affiliated to and which team does it belong to. So I deny this request. And then this validating admission webhook will deny actually this from running. Another area and another tool that you can use is Conftest, which does basically the same thing, only it scans for configuration. So what it does is you run Conftest on your Kubernetes YAML, and you write policies in Rego, which is a declarative language. It's more complicated than writing a YAML or a JSON, which has advantages and disadvantages. And you can test all of your Kubernetes workloads during the CI/CD pipeline and scan Helm charts and Kubernetes manifests. And finally, of course, we have our own Datree, which in a way is a combination of all 3 of them. So it's an open source tool. It has 5,000 GitHub stars. And the benefits of it is that it comes with predefined policies. So you don't need to think, what are the policies that I need? We already have all the best practices baked into the tool. You have a centralized management where you can enable and disable the policies for each types of workloads, and you get the full control of where you want to run it. And finally, you get a full centralized policy management solution where in one place you can modify a policy and all of the CLIs will be automatically updated. Now, maybe you're an organization that likes to build things by yourself. So you can go take Conftest, start writing your own policies, and build a centralized server to pull the policy from, and build a state server that will store all of the results. And basically, we can build the tree, which is okay. People do it. It's taking open policy agent and building it on top of it. I'm here to just show you the misconfigurations and the tools that you can use in order to prevent them. So my takeaways from this talk is: don't trust the default configuration, define policies in your organization, delegate the knowledge with your engineers in your organization, and it can happen to anyone. You just need to work on the right mechanisms to make sure that this does not happen in the future. Thank you very much for having me. It was a real pleasure to present here at daily.dev. Thank you.
Shimon, thank you so much for this talk. It was enlightening to see all these insights. And actually, I wasn't that aware that the ecosystem for policy management and sorts is so is so full of tools. So I'll be sure to check them all out.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And feel free to follow me on my Twitter and ask me any questions you want. It's at Shimon Tolts, and I'm here for you.
Yeah, so following Shimon, if you want, you can reach him out on Twitter. You can drop your questions on YouTube right now. He will be hanging out on the YouTube comments to see if you have any questions. And yeah, I guess his DMs are open for every question, right? So thanks a
Absolutely.
lot. Happy New Year and stay strong.
Novem Godam. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Coming up next is Mike from Ionic. And as I mentioned before, he's going to show us how to create delighted user experiences for your web application. So make some noise in the comments for Mike. Hey,
Hello.
Mike.
How's it going?
It's fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a crisp, 3 Celsius over here in my neck of the woods. So I'm bundling up for the winter.
Yeah, I'm with short sleeves, so I guess we have the
Jealous,
differences.
jealous.
Okay, so are you ready?
Yeah, let's go. All right.
Okay, so good luck.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So cool. We're going to be talking about building fast and fun apps. Um, I think it's kind of funny that I have to specify that apps can be fun, because a lot of the apps that I see, people tout as being, oh, this is super fast, it's super performant, it lazy loads everything, it's super optimized. They tend not to be, the most compelling apps. They are often very boring and maybe very business focused, but we can actually take the same things that we use in these super optimized performance apps and apply them to make our apps a little bit more fun. So if like it's been said before, my name is Mike Hartington. If you want to reach out afterwards, you can find me on Twitter, M Hartington. It's basically my handle everywhere. First initial, last name. Can't get any easier than that. I'm senior DevRel at Ionic, software engineer. Do a lot of stuff with code. Um, Take away anything, know that my kind of guiding light or thing that I try to focus on doing and showing is that you can build amazing apps, all powered by web technology. Doesn't matter what framework you choose to use. Could be Angular, could be React, could be Vue, could be Svelte, could be any framework, or no framework at all. The web's a compelling platform, and you can build amazing apps with it. And I say this a lot, and I try to show this, but the honest truth here is that this stuff is kind of hard. Building any app is often challenging, but when you are trying to see how you can take, um, a great native app and try to replicate it in, say, the web, you can see that there's some disconnects and there's some things that we as web developers need to re-implement ourselves. And it doesn't help that user expectation here is, working kind of against us in certain regards. Our apps have to not only be fast at loading and running, but the interactions and the time from when I tap something to a reaction happens, that needs to be very, very low. The app also needs to stay fast, so that way when we are performing a couple hundred operations, we're not blocking the app from doing anything else. We should be staying pretty fast, even while complex things are happening in the background potentially. And all these kind of interactions, these are just the top 3 that I think of, but there's like the generalized term that people throw around, and that is, does an app feel native or not? It's the stuff that I think about all the time, considering my work with Ionic, but I'm also trying to figure this out with generally, building great apps when I'm not using Ionic. Can I make my app feel native, even though it's just built with the web. So at the start of this whole, initial lockdown of everything, I was feeling very inspired. I wanted to take a few native apps, re-implement them in the web, because I thought I was, I thought I was going to have a lot of time to do that. I didn't realize I was going to have this much time, but I kind of went off the rails and I re-implemented an app that, ships on every single iOS device. And that's the default music app from Apple. So this is an app that I think shows some of the core things that a good native app should have. It's a little bit more complex in a hello world, but it's not necessarily like you are building a giant enterprise app. It's user facing. It's kind of got a few important screen, but mainly it has these really complex interactions and UI touches that make the app feel not only fun, but interesting enough that it could be re-implemented in the web and maybe potentially challenging. Here we just have the app changing the background color as you change songs. We're animating elements in and also animating the layout a little bit. And it started at the beginning. Here we'll see as it loops around. When we pause the music, the actual album art, scales a little bit, and the shadow of that scale also changes. So I want to re-implement this with the web, focusing on those three interactions: the scale and change of shadow or elevation, the animation of elements entering in and layout change, and also the background color. So those are my goals. I want to know how to do this and do it in a way that's going to be really performant and not ruin a device's battery, memory limits. I want to be able to run this on like my, several years old Nexus 5A and still have really good performance there. I wrote this originally with Ionic and Angular. Note that anything in here is not going to be specific to Ionic and Angular. You could be using something like Tailwind and React, or Vue and Vuetify. The UI layer and framework choice do not matter. They are just a way I was able to build my app and kind of focus on the core interaction without having to figure out how to build an item. So the first thing I want to touch on is this animating, what I'm calling animating the right stuff. And just being able to animate elements as they are on screen and making sure I'm doing so in a performant way. So here is like my very, very first attempt at animating this. And I don't know how well it's coming across in the stream, but don't worry. There's like a little shadow animating up and kind of pulsing below this card, just trying to get the animation right and the scale factor of this drop shadow. I'm not great at shadows in general, so I think I had a thought that many people probably would have. I don't know how to do CSS amazingly, so let's go copy some CSS from Material. They have actually some really great guides on elevation. Basically, how do you show that an element is close to a surface or far away from a surface? They give you some good guides and actually some really good reference CSS here. The thing that you need to know, though, is that shadows are actually a terrible thing to use. They're horrible for performance because once you set a shadow, anytime you want to change it, you basically now need to repaint the entire layer behind that. If you have, say, a complex shadow, well, that repaint time actually compounds. You now have to repaint so many more things to account for the multiple shadows that could be there. If you even try to animate them like our example and our kind of the native app does, you're not going to have a great time because they cannot be hardware accelerated. So they're going to be very laggy on a low end device. And all together, these two factors give you a very negative impact on your battery. If you're a user with like I said, an older device that does not last longer than 3 or 4 hours off the charger, you're going to see that battery drop significantly as you try to add shadows, animate them inside of your app, and do anything more than just a single shadow. So to illustrate this, there's actually some really good tools in your browser to highlight the repaint and affected areas. And here, I'm just debugging this in Safari or on an iPad using Safari's dev tools. But if you are on Chrome, you could do the same thing. There's this repaint flag that you can toggle and show as you are animating that original shadow. Let's go ahead and see what areas are being repainted as we are changing this. And you can see this much red is no good. This is terrible, bad for performance, and this is on like a fairly good iPad. So my original CSS implementation here is just to have this animation. I have my keyframes and I'm changing the shadow, basically copying the at 0 and 100%. This is my close to the surface, and at 50%, this is my pretty far away from the surface. This is giving me terrible performance. How can we replace this? Well, to replace this, we're actually going to use our own shadow element. And this, we're actually going to do a quick little hack, and we're going to use the after pseudo element as our way of creating the shadow. So here we're just creating the after element. Content is nothing. Width and height 100%. Background color is like a nice shade of 0.2 opacity of black. And the really fun thing here is that we can apply the filter and the blur, and then we can use this transform scale 3D to have performant ways of scaling a technically our own shadow element. And by doing the transforms instead of actually applying and changing the shadows altogether, we are actually making sure that this is much more performant than the original implementation. And to prove it, here is that same, here's that slight change in CSS. And we have the same setup where we have the paint flashing enabled, and we aren't getting any flashing because the after element gets promoted to its own layer. We can actually optimize the animation and make sure that it's not affecting other bits of the browser's rendering process. So this is instantly a win. I have some really detailed breakdowns in a tweet from a while ago, but showing not only just this repaints, but the actual performance impacts on this. I think it went something up to 120, 130 repaints per second, which is terrible. This essentially has 0. So we solved our way of having this elevation and shadow. We are just going to use our own little pseudo element to maintain that and use that transforms and scales to actually change this. What about the other thing? And this is, recording from the native app. How do we animate this stuff? So I tried to do this. I thought I got pretty far. I could animate one, but not the other. Layout shifts ended up coming in, and I wasn't quite sure how to handle animating things that, as I change the layout, how do I animate them entering and leaving the DOM? I thought this was going to be not possible, and I was going to simply just give up on it until I rediscovered this process of flip. Now, flip animations are not something that are brand new, and I definitely did not invent it. I don't claim to have invented it, but it's a really nice technique that we get from traditional 3D animation, and we can use here on the web. So this is just like a really, really brief summary of it. Flip, it's an acronym. It stands for first, you grab the snapshot of the element, its very beginning position. Then you do a layout change, and then you grab the layout position of that last change. From there, you invert these two values, and you basically are creating these from to CSS animations or web animations, and then you play the animations together. So you basically use the layout shifts to your advantage and calculate the changes based on those layout shifts. So in practice, what we end up having is something like this, which is a fairly trivial animation change. First, we get the two elements that we want to animate. In this case, we have this now playing element called track player, and then we have the queue of songs that are going to play next. We get their position, so we're going to call get client bounding rec to get their width, height, top left, bottom right. We're going to get all the position of that element. From there, we then call this classless toggle, and we toggle a layout change. We then go ahead and get the layout change, get the client rec again to have our after. From there, we can go ahead and start to do some math and go and say, hey, get me the change in X and Y position by just doing some simple subtraction. We can then change the actual scale, and we can actually change some of the other elements by using a little bit more complex math. But all we're really doing is comparing before and after values here to figure out what is our change in layout. Then we go ahead and we use this create animation function. This could be any CSS, any web animation library if you want. We are getting the element that we would like to animate, and then we use a from to animation to transform and use scale 3D based on these factors. The other animation is a little bit simpler. We're just translating we're just using the translate 3D to translate where it is in the layout. So all this put together, what do we have? Well, this is our web version. And we can see that we have this animation as the element, as the layout change happens, we are animating this new element up from some depth, and we're animating this main content over a little bit. So this animation is just figuring out what it needs to do by itself. I don't really need to do anything here. I just need to know, hey, here's the before, here's the after, figure it out. What's nice about this, though, is that the animations are independent of orientation or device scale. So if I want to go ahead and have a custom animation for, say, portrait mode, it's as simple as just checking to see what's my device orientation. So here we can have similar animations for the player queue, but the now playing album can have their own unique animation that is, again, just getting the before and after values and then basically animating everything for you. So it's really, really nice here. My example, I'm using an animation library that Ionic provides, but you could use any other animation library out there. You could use, I think there's a couple from the React ecosystem. A popular one that is, ecosystem agnostic is Greensock. They actually have a library called Flip that is built specifically for the Flip animation kind of paradigm that you can use. It's, I think, now open source for everyone who doesn't pay Greensock, but they have an animation aspect that is specifically for this and is probably super robust considering it's Greensock. So definitely check it out. It's pretty cool. My last kind of part that I wanted to re-implement was this reactive content. And this is basically having the background art update based on the currently playing song. So, need to figure out a way how to do this. And I kind of had done this before. In a previous example, I had used some existing library, but I had some ideas of how I could improve this. So there's this library out there called Color Thief. It works in a browser and in Node, but you basically are able to give it a image, and it will go through and analyze the entire pixel data, get you the most common color, and then some additional colors as well. So this here, the dominant color is this blue, and then the rest of the palette of this image is the actual rest of the colors. So this is really, really cool, but it runs in the main thread, which is very, very slow. And anytime you're doing things like comparing image data, it's going to be very, very slow. So I want to figure out a way to do that, and I'm looking here at an Angular directive, which you don't really need to know if you don't know Angular, but all I'm doing is say, hey, let's use a web worker instead. So I rewrote Color Thief. Basically, go ahead, grab the current image, and then I want to say, hey, get me the palette of this image from this image URL. Well, from there, I can go ahead and say, all right, well, we get the palette, we get the image, we go ahead and we say, create a canvas, go ahead, put in that image in that canvas, get the pixel and the pixel count. And then we're going through and creating an array of pixel data, basically saying for every single pixel in this giant image, go through and get me the RGBA of all of that, and then we're going to push that onto the original pixel array. So basically, we have this giant array, which is an array with RGB array values in there. So it is a thing. It can be done. You could optimize this even further, which I eventually have done. But the main point here is that we now have this pixel data. If we want to go through and find the most common color from this, we're just going to actually use a worker here to post that message with the pixel array and the number of colors we want to return. Once we go ahead and send that data off, we're just going to send it to a worker, and the worker is going to process it off the main thread. When we want to get that data back, we have our worker running. We say on message, grab that data, and we do some cleanup, and then we just have that new color data available to us. So very, very, very simple here. If we go through and we see what this looks like when it's all put together, as we change the songs, you can see that the color automatically updates. It's actually really, really performant because it's all being done in the background. Now, I have this app actually up and running. You could go see it yourself. You go to startrack/ng.web.app. I can make sure that that gets dropped in the comments, but if you actually want to see a real example, I have it running here on my iPad. You can see it's running pretty smooth. Let's go to that album again, and this is the what do we call it? Sleep sounds. A nice little album to make sure that you can fall asleep. Let's go ahead and play this, and let's go up to our album here. Now you can see we have the scale working. We have a nice little animation curve and easing on this, where as we change, it feels nice. Got some good interactions, and that drop shadow actually changes really well. Go ahead. We have the now playing, animating in and properly. Everything feels nice and smooth. We go ahead and we play, and then we go say, skip to the next song. The background color eases into this new color, and it's done super, super performantly. I don't know why the image doesn't want to update. This is why we never do things live. But if we go to say breathe, the background color is going to change because it's using the actual album update. This is probably just some change detection issue that I need to fix apparently, but it actually works. So yeah, let me make sure that that gets dropped in the chat later on because I can't share it here. I'll make sure that it gets shared. But kind of putting this all together, we have an app that works really, really well. What are some of these parting thoughts that we have from here? The most important thing to take away from this is that we can have nice things. We can have apps that are fun, lazy loaded, and very, very fast. You have to be very smart about how you build your UI. Maybe not using things like drop shadows or box shadows, but recreating these elements yourself. If you want to have animations, look at the flip animation approach. It can really make things very simple and very performant, and you don't have to recalculate and account for every single step of that animation. Lastly, use web workers. If you can, use a web worker. They're super awesome. You have some limitations here and there, but they are fast. They are so cool. And I don't think they get used nearly often enough as they should. So try that out. And keep in mind that, yeah, this stuff can be done, and we can have really, really performant apps. So that's all I got for now, but I'm happy to take any questions. If you have any, please drop them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much. You can find me online, M. Hartington again. Have a great rest of the year, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was such an insightful talk. Great to learn about web workers and flip animations. And I didn't catch any questions. So if you happen to have any questions later on, as Mike mentioned, you can reach him out on Twitter or on YouTube here in the comments. And that's it for now. So thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. And we are about to close the year. But before that, please make some noise to Yuval from Amplication, sorry. Hey,
Hello,
Yuval.
everybody. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, pleasure to be the last speaker at the last event this year. So I'm going to close it here for you guys, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, just remember to close the door once you finish.
Yeah,
Kidding.
but we're going to open a new one for a great year ahead.
Yeah, I'm personally looking forward to see everything that you cooked for 2022. I'm sure you have some great plans ahead.
Yep, great.
So take it from here, Yuval. I just can't see your screen in the bottom, so maybe you can share. Okay, yeah.
All right,
yeah.
cool. So, like I said, really glad to be here. It's going to be really hard to top any of the previous talks, great talks by Shimon and Mike. I loved it. And today I'm going to show you Amplication. Amplication is an open source project I'm working on almost for the last 2 years. And now it's even a company I'm leading as a CEO. We just got some funding, and we're getting a lot of traction from the community, and building this project with the community is an amazing journey. And I would love to share today what we're doing and how you can use Amplication. And like I said, looking ahead for a great year, 2022, with a lot of plans about Amplication. So let's talk and see what Amplication is. Amplication, basically, it's a framework. It's not even a framework, it's a platform. And our goal is to empower developers to build business application really, really fast, but without compromising on anything like quality, control, or ownership. And meaning that we are looking to provide a solution in scale. So it's not a backend as a service, which is perfect for some scenarios, but we are looking to give developer the power to build their own backend. We just generate everything for you, the things that you don't like to do. So when looking on what developer want, eventually they want to create a value, meaning writing the business logic, writing the things that make difference, and deliver the value, meaning creating beautiful user interface like we just showed by Mike. So we wish this was our day, creating value, writing business logic, everything else is not important. But eventually we know that our day looks more like this. So we saw Shimon talk about Kubernetes misconfiguration, and we know there are many things in the infrastructure that we need to deal with. Authentication, API, certification, deployment, migration, queues, integration, many things that we don't really want to spend our time writing things that people already wrote so many times, and every time we need to find the right connection between one package to the other and do maintenance for packages and spend a lot of time, our precious time, on things that we don't really enjoy to do. And this is what Amplication is aiming at. We want to create everything for the developer, anything that he don't really want to create on his own, but without taking any control or power from the developer. So what we do, we generate code for you. This is our stack, so I'll talk about the stack in a second. But we want to generate the code for you. We push it to GitHub or any other source control in the future. And then eventually you own the code, you have the code in your own repository, you can customize it, you can keep build on top of it. The idea is that you push changes back to GitHub. We know how to handle those changes and keep adding other changes on top of it. And the idea is, once again, to bring all the benefits of low code and code generation without taking any of the ownership and freedom from the developers. Talking about the stack, so we are really opinionated of what we're doing right now as far as the stack. We are building processes or servers with Node.js, Net.js, Prisma, the ORM, and PostgreSDB. But the more we move forward, the idea is to be able to support more and more technologies in that specific stack, like instead of Postgres, Mongo, or MySQL, or whatever. But in the future, we're really aiming at be able to generate those infrastructure code in any technology, any stack, not only in the Node.js world. So I think we can just go quickly deep dive into a demo, which will show us what we can do. And you will see how easy to build with Amplication. So let's open our, of course, by the way, congratulations on your new sidebar. Excellent work there. And let's start with a new project. I'll go to Amplication. And Amplication is an open source project. You can go ahead to our repo, clone the project and run your own server, but it's also a SaaS, free offering SaaS, so you can just go ahead, sign up, and start using Amplication. You don't really need to do the entire thing if you just want to create apps, but if you want to contribute, if you want to understand the project, of course, everything is open source on our repo. So let's create a new app, and we'll start from scratch. And what we will do today, we will just create a simple project management app with a project and task. You will see how we configure the data models, how we configure relations, and then we'll see what Amplication does for us really quick. So the first entity will create his project, and we just give a project name, and that should be enough. And let's go and create another entity, and we'll call that task. And the task is going to have a title. It's going to be linked to a project, of course. And we can also link that to a user. So if you notice, when we created the app, we got it with one built-in entity called user, already ready-made with all the fields that you need to for user management. So we have those three entities right now. Really simple project, but let's see what will happen. Before we'll commit the changes and we'll ask Amplication to generate all the code, I will go to the setting page, and I will ask Amplication to sync with a GitHub repo. And I will create a new repo for this project. I will call it daily.dev. And I will create that repo. And we are ready to go. We'll call that initial commit. We'll commit the changes. Now what we're seeing that we have a build process running. We can see the actual code generation process running in the background. It should take like another second. Once it's complete, we see that the code was already pushed to our GitHub repo. And now in the background, we started building a Docker image with all the components that created the server and an admin UI client that knows how to work with the server. And once that's done, we will even deploy that for you to a sandbox environment on our cloud, so you can start using your server almost immediately. But that's it, we are ready. So let's go and open GitHub. And we can see that Amplication generated for us 243 files in a new pull request. We will merge that pull request. And let's see what we got from Amplication. So you can see we have an admin UI. This is the client that knows to work with the server, and we have the server. So a few sentences about this, the goal of this project. So we aim to provide all the benefits and all the advantages of backend development. So our focus is not on the client, even though we do provide the admin UI, which built with React Admin, a really nice open source project, which you can use to start working with the server. But the idea is to actually provide you the server, and you can go as a developer, build your own clients, mobile, or native, web, or anything other than that, and you can work with our APIs. So we generate APIs, and if we look on the code on the server, we can see that we use Prisma. So for example, the schema for Prisma is here, and we can see the user model, and we can see the project which just created, and we can see the task with references to the project and references to the user and so on. So just another quick look on the code, we can see that in the source we have, for example, the project folder with all the data entities and data model, DTOs, service for the data access, both resolver for GraphQL API and controller for REST API. We even provided with some test baked in for all the CRUD operations. So let's go ahead and take this project and let's clone it and open it on VS Code. Sorry for that. Let me go right here. And once again, we have all the code generated for us, and we can start working on it. We can start customizing. We can start build on it and do whatever we want with that, publish that anywhere we want. And before we run the code and execute it locally and do everything else, let me just go back for a second to my browser. And I created another project. Since this Docker build and deployment, now it takes about 5-6 minutes. We still need to improve that. But I created another project ahead with the exact same entities and everything already made. So if we'll go and we'll see that this project was already deployed successfully. And if we'll click here on the sandbox, the link to sandbox, we can see the app that we generated. So we can actually go and sign into the admin with the default credentials, and we can go ahead and create a project. Create tasks, select the project we just created, select the date, admin user. So you can see you have all the UI, the admin UI for start using the server, but of course that's not our goal. Like we said, the UI is just some kind of a bonus to start working with the server. We can see that we have both REST API and GraphQL API. If I'll open the REST API, we can see we get all the server fully documented with Swagger, so we can start querying the database, start running all the API requests on the database. And if we'll go back, we can see also the GraphQL API right there. And just to show you, for example, I want to run a query, and I got all the definition from the server. So I want a project and the name of the project, and I wanted tasks. And for each task, I want to select the title and the user and so on. So you can easily go and use all that, and we automatically generated everything for you. So basically, there is even, like we saw, there is a login authentication mechanism already implemented. So you can go ahead, take the token, use the project and everything else. It's all running, it's all live. So you can go ahead and start working on your project. So I'll go back to VS Code and let's see how we do it locally. So just before we do that, let me show you just one other document on our doc site. There is a document that explains everything I'm doing right now, running dev environment. So once we have the source code, we basically need, of course, to run npm install both on the server and the admin, running Docker DB, Prisma generate, DB init. So let's do all that and see how it goes. So I'll create another instance of the console and go also to the admin folder. And I run npm install here also. So we have both of them running simultaneously. Once we finish with that, after npm install, we want to run the Docker DB. So you can see that the code is already shipped with all the Docker configuration file in order to run the Postgres database and everything that you need to run your project with. So I'll run that command. Next thing will be to create the Prisma client based on our new schema. We'll initialize the database with basic init data like default password and other stuff. And that is, the server is ready to run, and the admin also supposedly completed the installation. So we can run the server. And this is the admin also completed. Let's run that also. So it just opened in another tab. Let me open that, the other window. You can see the server is already running with all our code, and the client is just loading. Here it is. This is my client. I just sign in with the default credentials, admin, and I have my app running. So of course, this is nice, but this is not our goal. As developer, like we said, we want to create a business logic. We want to make difference. So Amplication created everything for us really nice, really quickly, but we want to go and create business logic. We want to do all the stuff that make difference. So if I'll go back to our doc site, sorry, I will show you how we do it, but just for later references, there are different articles on how to add custom code to Amplication. So the basic concept is that we have separation of different layers of the layer we auto-generate, and we provide you with another layer where you can easily write custom code without worrying that it will be overridden. So we'll go to the server folder, and we'll open the customer, the project folder, for example. We can see, for example, that we have a project service here, but it's a skeleton, it's an empty class, and inherits everything from project service base. Project service base is this as a file that resides in this folder, and this folder automatically auto-generated and will be overridden by Amplication every time you generate code or every time you do changes in Amplication. So you don't really want to change the file in this folder. So if we go ahead and look on the project service base, we can see that we have all this basic root operation, like find many, find one, create, update, and we even have CRUD operation for the, or list operation for the relationship. So for project, we even have find task, and for task, we may have find user or get user. So let's have a look on the task. Task service, once again, we have all the basic root operation, and we have get project, and we have get user. So you get all the operation. That's why you can easily go ahead and use the GraphQL API. So if I'll open the client once again, and I will open the GraphQL instance or playground. Sorry. So this is why we can do all this querying and everything, because we already provide all the references, all the relations between all the fields and so on. So you can easily do all that with ease. Now let's go back to our code, and let's take this project service base, and let's take the create function and copy that to that file. And basically what we want to do, we want to make sure we can customize, or maybe, I don't know, run some kind of validation before we create a customer, before we create a project, sorry. So what we can do, go ahead and do that. And instead of this Prisma project and so on, we can do a super create arg. So we pass all the argument to the base class, but before we do that, we want to do args data name equal new name, for example, or whatever else logic we want to do here. So we can easily change the logic before, after, we can call the super, or we can override the entire logic and don't do anything. And the idea is that we can keep that logic here, and if we'll go back to application, and we'll go back to our project, this app, with a sync to our GitHub repo. And I will go back here, and let's say I want to add on the project another description field, right? And I'll just add another commit, add description project. And we commit that. And once again, we see we have a new build running. And the new build will be pushed back to GitHub. And once it's done, I will open GitHub. And now I see that I have a pull request number 2 with only 20 files that were changed. So we can see that the project DTO on the project folder is changed with a new field. And if we quickly skip to the admin UI, for example, we can see that we have a new text field for the project description. And if we'll have a look on the project schema on Prisma file, we can see that right now we have a new description field in that Prisma file, and so on. So you get all those benefits really, really quick with any change you can do via application. And right now it includes the data or data schema management, also includes some role management. So you can go ahead and create roles, for example, an admin and a manager. And we can go back to our data models and decide that only manager, for example, can create new projects. So it's going to be granular, and only manager and admin can create new projects. So we can fine-tune the permission based on entities, and not only that, we can even add specific entities for fields. So for example, let's say a name can only be updated by an admin and not by a manager. and so on. So we can easily change those settings per entity, and we can add more roles. And every time we do that, once again, we add roles, commit that, we see another build. Once again, we will see another push to GitHub. And we'll open GitHub. We have a new commit, new PR with new changes. Since we didn't merge the previous change, so we can do that the other way. Let me merge that so we can see only the tangents on the master. And what I'm looking at is these roles and so on. So we see all those roles, and not only here, we can see that we have this JSON file with all the grants. So we're using, like I said, we're using Nest.js for the server as a framework, and we use all the access control based on packages by Nest that using the grant. So we update that based on the setting, and you can easily change that via application. Our roadmap includes many features that will benefit the users for do stuff like integration, basic integration with like common services, or even more generic integration, HTTP integration like REST or GraphQL and things like that. So there are a lot more to come. That is more or less Ido.
Thank you very much, Yuval. Actually, I love your hybrid approach where you decided, usually this kind of solutions, they take control all over your application, and this hybrid approach really amazes me. And I can't wait to give it a try already.
I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, I agree. When I started working in application, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to create the next thing without really inventing anything new. So I don't want to invent new technology. I don't want anyone that come to use application to have a new learning curve, really steep learning curve to learn new frameworks, and all the framework change all the time. So if you're already familiar with Nest.js, already familiar with Node.js, Postgres, Prisma, this is the go-to place. You can just easily create that, and we are not trying to take any control from you. The idea is that it's really a fair game for a developer to say, hey, I got all this great value on day one. That's enough for me. I don't want to keep doing those sync with application and keep building with application. That's cool. You can go. Our goal, of course, is to be able to give you more option as far as customization above of what we right now offers, which is the basic inheritance classes and so on, which allow you get more benefits and continuous value from application without really leaving. But the idea is that we want to provide you all the control on your code, and like you said, a hybrid solution that you can work in both places.
Yeah, I love this approach and this attitude, and also, even for those who don't know Nest.js or are familiar with Prisma, application can be your getting started, boilerplate your project with everything you need, and slowly you can get into it. It seems like it already puts you in a great starting point.
Yeah, we see a lot of newcomers, a lot of juniors that really excited about what they're getting because they use the code we generate for them to learn how to do stuff. So they get all that value on day one, and they're really excited about everything. So they start customizing it and start learning from it. So yeah, you don't really have to know how to use Nest.js. You can even use application to learn how to use Nest.js and how to learn Prisma.
And we have Liran here who asked the question. He already gotten the answer from Ofek, which I guess is from your team. But Liran asks, is there a marketplace of plugins / add-ons to use in application when I'm building my apps? So although Ofek answered, I still, want maybe we can get a glimpse or something out of it.
So absolutely, not yet. The answer is not yet, but it's absolutely in our roadmap. The idea is to be able to create some kind of a marketplace, a library where the community can even create plugins. So a developer created the integration with Stripe for payments, and another one created integration with Twilio for SMS. So you can publish that on our library, and everybody else can just use that, incorporate it in their application project, and get the benefits from everybody. And of course, the idea is that we will drive that and provide the first few example and create some kind of a plugin or middleware architecture design where it's going to be really easy to create those plugin and push that into your code.
Yeah, I believe this kind of marketplace really helps, helps this kind of products blow up and expand. So good luck with it, and I'm sure it will be awesome. So Yuval, that's all. Thank you very much for coming, and I wish you a Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. It was great seeing you, great being here, and like I promised, I closed the door and open a new one for a great year for everybody.
Yep. So good luck. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
So Fox, that was all, and I wish you all a Happy New Year. Thank you all for taking part in this community and coming to every event that we host every month. We're already cooking some nice surprises to 2022. I always get confused with it, but stay tuned. Our upcoming event on January is going to be about Vue.js. So if you are a Vue fan, make sure to stay tuned. We will soon open the registration for the January event. And until then, stay safe and see you in 1 month from now. Happy New Year, everyone. Bye-bye.